Hello, and welcome to episode 39 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp, and with me, as always, are Michael Ronn and Jamie Maltman. How you guys doing?
Great.
Awesome.
And tonight we are joined by two-thirds of Sterling and Stone, and that would be Johnny B. Truant and Sean Platt, two very prolific authors. How are you guys doing?
We're great. Dave did tell us that to tell you that he hates you.
Yeah, ironic that David isn't here.
Right, but did you just see your Slack from a few minutes ago?
No.
Okay, I'm going to read this because it's worth it. It's a slight diversion, but this came on right as I was logging on, so I didn't even respond to it. So you guys are hearing it first here. From Dave, in all caps, emergency BOU tonight. Dave returns to Olive Garden. They did the one thing that I can never, ever, in all caps, forgive. I'll give you guys a teaser. I told the waitress, quote, I am absolutely disgusted. Now, just we could be doing an emergency BOU right now and finding out all about Dave's apocalypse at the Olive Garden. So.
She had to have licked her fingers before she gave him the bill or something. I don't know.
I'll guess. Hold on.
Or the breadsticks were soggy or something.
So while Sean's doing that, we'll start our quick roundtable. As always, we start by talking about what we've been reading over the last week. So, Jamie, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll just do quickly. I've been continuing the same couple of books I was finishing up these past few weeks. That was that Out of Darkness that I'll probably talk about next week by Kate Caffey, fantasy novel. And I've been reading, I actually finished off Whole Earth Discipline by Stuart Brand, which is the one that's written, it's recommended by Hugh Howey, actually, in his blog. And it's an amazing read. It's like about 5 years old, but talking about climate change and all the different technologies that we need to bring to bear on that. And that book is fantastic.
What's it called, Jamie?
It's Whole Earth Discipline, an eco-pragmatist approach by Stuart Brand. And he's like a veteran, like 70-year-old ecologist who has, he's looked into all these different technologies and changed his mind over his lifetime on like nuclear and on genetic engineering and different things like that. So it's really, really cool stuff. And I think anyone, no matter where you stand on some of those different topics, you should read it because he'll make you think. And he really brings that scientific approach because so much of the stuff that you get in the sound bites of Facebook and internet articles and blog posts about that stuff is very, very partially informed at best, right? And it's or it's just complete nonsense. But it's an amazing book. It's terrifying at the beginning when he really gets into the global warming stuff, but some of the ideas and just how green like urbanization is and things like that. I love the book. He's got a great style and some really cool things that hopefully more people can work on in the future. Do
you happen to know if it's available in audio?
I don't know offhand, but check it out if it is. Hopefully there's a good narrator. It'd be cool if he did.
Awesome.
He sounds like a really cool guy. So.
Cool. So if we're going left to right on the bottom of my screen, that would mean Johnny's up next. Have you got lots of reading done this recently, Johnny?
I'm into a read right now that I'm really, really enjoying, and I know Sean read it first. I read it by association, came across my radar. I'm reading The Martian, so really enjoying that.
Patrick is very happy right now.
These guys are sick of hearing me talk about The Martian.
Yeah, I'm. What am I about? I'm maybe halfway into it. So it really is a really cool read, and I was just intrigued by it, and I said, well, that's what I want to pick up, and so I'm reading that. I think I'm also reading Sid Fields' screenplay, which Sean also recommended. Not too far into that. I'm only about 15% into it because we write kind of cinematically, so the idea of and we want to write screenplays and movies down the road, so steeping in that a little bit felt like a good idea, and so I'm digging it.
That's cool. So you're talking about The Martian. I was going to say, how happy were you guys to see your book displace The Martian on the #1 spot? Was that in the Apple Store?
That was in the Apple Store, and that was pretty awesome.
It was for about 5 hours, but I'll take it.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Did The Martian claw its way back up to the #1 spot?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and deservedly so. I mean, but we were happy for our 15 minutes. It was awesome.
That's pretty cool. So, Michael, how about you?
Yeah, I've been rereading this week. I've been rereading Christine Catherine Rush's The Freelancer Survival Guide. and I've got that in audio, so it's been good to read and listen to that. So I always love reading her stuff. Just really, really good writing advice,
Yeah,
So
we read her discoverability book a
Mhm.
few months
yeah,
back.
that was fantastic too.
Yeah, I thought that
Yeah,
was great.
I love all of her books and Dean Wesley Smith's books, so I could reread those several times. I mean, I always feel like I get something different from them each time. And
Yeah, that's the only one I've read, but I want to read more. I was impressed.
yeah, well, Freelancer Survival Guide's an audio, Sean. So if
I'm big on audio right now.
There
It
you
exactly,
makes
go.
it so easy.
Just made him happy.
exactly, yeah, I think it's even in Whisper Sync. So go for it. But yeah, I read that, and then I'm also going to be re-listening to Beauty and Sadness by Yasunari Kawabata. It's a book I read a couple of years ago and just loved it. He's a Japanese author, and it's just a really beautiful book about a
Beauty
guy
and
that's
Sadness?
Beauty and Sadness, yeah, by Yasunari Kawabata, and I can spell it for you if you want later. But yeah, it's a beautiful book, and it's about this guy. He's a writer. He lives in Japan, and he's going through a rocky marriage with his wife, and he's having an affair with another woman, and it's yeah, it's just very interesting and very cinematic in a way, and very beautifully written and very poetic. So one of my favorite books of all time, and I got the audio version, so I look forward to listening to that.
Awesome. Sean, how about you?
I'm juggling a bunch of books right now. Should I just pick one? I did just finish Sid Field's screenplay, which I'm really glad I read, and I think I want to read that again. And that was pretty cool. And I just finished reading the American Beauty screenplay, and then I watched the movie last night, and I really like that exercise of reading the screenplay and then immediately watching the movie. So that's really cool. Right now I'm listening to Axis of Aaron, which just finished on.
That's a great book.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Two on my list. I'm reading For Nevermore to Haley, and I'm listening to Axis of Aaron because David Lawrence is recording it for us, and I have all the master files, and I need to approve them. But I have to listen. Most everything I listen to is on twice speed, but that one I have to listen to at regular rhythm because I'm supposed to be listening to it as a quality check, and not just the story. So it's a little slower. I'm also listening to the Steve Jobs autobiography, or not autobiography, the biography, because we're going to be writing the Beam season 3 soon, and there are some personality quirks that I want to give to Noah West, and so I thought it would be cool to. I mean, I know his story in broad strokes, but I wanted to get into the weeds there a little bit. So I'm
That's a
reading
great
that.
book too. I really enjoyed that last
Yeah,
year. I think.
I'm like 2/3 through it, and God, is that guy a dick?
Yeah.
But he also changed the world, and he's so magical, and that's exactly what I wanted. Like I like that amount of conflict. Like wow, I couldn't be friends with a guy like that. But on the other hand, wow, he's like he had pixie dust, and he made so many. I mean, we thank him for Apple and Pixar. So wow. But anyway, I want some of that stuff for Noah, so I thought it was worth reading, and I'm just about to go into Beam season 1 plugged and season 2 before we outline season 3. So I thought that'd be cool. And then I'm reading this, which I would recommend to everyone on this call. Have you guys read The Techniques of the Selling Writer?
No.
No.
Okay, this is, I think, the best book, at least that I've ever read, on writing. I read it once, like maybe 4 years ago, and I'm reading it again. It's really dry. It's not like On Writing is the most fun book I've ever read on writing. That's what I would like if I'm just for pleasure. On Writing is the best. But this Techniques of the Selling Writer, it's by a guy named Dwight Swain. Never heard of him. Doesn't matter. But he's really boring. He is the most boring writer about writing ever. So I know I'm underselling this.
This is a great recommendation.
But I mean, this is how boring he is. He's talking about how to set up a scene, and he comes listen to how catchy this is. They're called motivational reaction units. I mean, like, who wants to read that? But when you're done with it, you're gonna be a better writer. So I definitely recommend it. I'm already I'm kind of juiced, and the way I outline beats actually has a lot to do with this book. That I read this right before I outlined the original Beam 4 years ago. So it's really cool. I guess that's it.
That's quite a bit. And you said that was Dwight Swain with an N?
Dwight Swain.
A-I-N. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'm also reading Man's Search for Meaning, just because I started it and need to finish that. And that's by Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of the Holocaust, and he writes about his time there. So that one's almost done too. It's like halfway through.
Awesome. So that leaves me, and I'll go quick. I continued reading Wonder Book, which is a very slow read, just because it's so thick and dense. And Jamie, you're going to have to remind me again the name of the author.
Jeff Vandermeer.
Jeff Vandermeer, and so that book also seems to kind of be making the rounds. It's gorgeous, and Johnny and Sean, if you guys aren't aware of it, it's just sort of this massive inspirational book on writing science fiction and fantasy. I don't know if you guys saw Chrissy Moss picked it up last week on our recommendation, and she was vlogging about it during the week.
I've seen that cover before.
Awesome.
It's just a gorgeous, just for inspiration and information on writing science fiction and fantasy. It's beautiful.
I would say every time I open it, it's like you're inspired by something. It's so cool.
Yeah. I still wish that thing came in hardcover so you could.
Yeah, that looks worth getting in print.
You have to.
Oh, yeah.
It's the one book I bought in print, like.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
The artwork is
That's gorgeous.
phenomenal.
For my birthday, Dave got me the J.J. Abrams book, which there's no way that would work as a digital book. There's no way. It's too magical. Like you need the hard copy on that.
Cool. And the other book I read was Invasion by Johnny B. Truant and Sean Platt.
That's a good one too. Almost as good as
Sounds
Axis
like
of
a waste
Aaron.
of time.
Apparently, it's better than The Martian. I don't know. It's
For 5 hours. Good. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that.
Did anybody read The Goldfinch?
No, I haven't read it.
We just lost your sound there, Patrick, while you're trying to say great things about Invasion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought, does he have no review?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't. Yeah, my arm must have hit the mute button there while I was saying great things. No, I think it was a great story, and the thing that jumped out for me that I put in the review was just how real the characters in this book specifically feel to me, where they're experiencing feelings and thoughts that I think a lot of authors probably shy away from. The stepson's feelings towards his stepmother, that kind of stuff. all of the stuff that's going on internally while they're experiencing these events was just, I thought, really special and kind of drove the story forward. So it was a lot of fun to read.
That was a perfect example of our partnership, honestly, because all that stuff would not exist if Sean hadn't plotted it out. He said from the beginning he wanted interpersonal dynamics in a family moving across the country. It wasn't going to be about just the flight. It was going to be about these people sort of jammed into a situation where they were going to be uncomfortable. So that's totally Sean's doing, like what you were talking about with the stepson and the wife and all that. But then I got to articulate it. Like I got to kind of steep in those characters and say, okay, well, how would it manifest? And so that's a pure example of something that wouldn't have been as good if one of us had done it.
Yeah, and some of the decisions that Johnny made while writing that draft, I just love. So, for example, in the beats, Raj, I don't want to spoil a lot here, but Raj is left behind. but that didn't, like, Raj is only there at the very, very beginning to kind of serve a couple of story things that we need to happen. And then he's gone. But Johnny's like, no, we couldn't just leave him. And so he ended up, kind of going along for the ride. But that's I love that Johnny did that because I think it worked. And now, Raj is Raj. But I also really like Meyer's kind of cold, calculating way of thinking about Raj. And to me, that was very human because it'd be easy to make Meyer the good guy who wants to take care of everybody. But he's not. He's like, yeah, I want to take care of my family, and I'll take care of Raj if I have time.
Right. Right.
That's kind of cool because I think that a lot of authors would want the main character to be a little more sympathetic than that. But we'd rather go with reality than sympathy. Like, no, the dude he's kind of cold. That's why he became so successful. And so if he has to,
It's like Steve Jobs.
So,
Well, and
right.
it's interesting because he doesn't even know yet just how, I guess, angry he should be at Raj in this book. So,
Right.
and
That'll come.
yeah, so when I saw you guys already have the second book up for pre-order.
Yeah.
And the third, actually.
Oh, and the third.
Nice.
So what's the timeline on those? Do you know?
The contact. The second book is called Contact. It comes out the 9th of April, and then the third book is called Colonization, which comes out the 19th of May.
Cool.
Wow, that's fast.
It's really fast.
Not surprising, but fast.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Beyonce.
That's awesome. So that's our roundtable on our books. Took a little longer than I thought, but there are 5 of us, so we'll
Yeah, we're 2 of them, really. Let's be fair.
So we'll move on to our topic, and what we picked for this week was the books that defined or inspired us. So does anybody has some initial thoughts who wants to dive in on that first? If not, I will. There's some dead air there, so I'll fill it. So we can keep it moving. When I was thinking about this topic, it kind of occurred to me to kind of chart almost the books that from reading through childhood to now that have kind of defined, and so I kind of would chart a path for me from Asimov and Foundation when I was a kid through discovering Kurt Vonnegut when I got a little bit older, and that then led me to Philip K. Dick, and then John Scalzi, and then probably Hugh Howey, which then led me into sort of the whole indie publishing world. And then most recently, I would say Ready Player One by Ernest Cline.
That was good.
And
That's
then
on my list.
Yeah, and then probably ending with The Martian for me. So when I was thinking about books that define or inspire you, I was thinking kind of the books that you can't shut up about. So that would be The Martian for Jamie and Michael and with me. Or just the books that you read whenever and they just stick with you and they're in the back of your brain, they just kind of follow you wherever you go. And for me, those are the authors that did it for me.
I had to laugh because I was thinking of the books that were like my favorite books, or the ones that sort of like I could draw a path through. But when you said ones you can't shut up about, I almost feel like Sean should answer this question for me, because there's a roster of about 5 or 6 books that I mention all the time.
Oh yeah, I'll answer this for you. Dune, and all of these are on my list. There's Dune, absolutely. Like I need. You could say why you love them, but Dune is on that list. House of Leaves is on that list. Those are the 2 really big ones.
I've mentioned, what was the one I've mentioned a few times recently? I wouldn't say this defined me at all, but I've referenced Sphere a bunch of times, Michael Crichton's book. The book version, not the movie. The movie was...
Yeah, you mentioned Sphere, and you've also mentioned, it's not Ready Player One, but it makes me think of Ready Player One. It's the one in the future where they're all, everything's corporate named.
Oh, that's nobody...
Jennifer Government?
Oh,
Yes.
I can't believe you pulled that out, Patrick. Kudos, because I just ran across that book and I really thought it was awesome. Jennifer Government was good.
Well, I read that because the year before, so 2013, Hugh Howey's book of the year was Max Berry's Lexicon. So I read that, and then from there moved on and read Jennifer Government. Yeah, it's a great book.
But if I were to say, like, the way I was originally going to answer that is, it was Stephen King. Early on, my dad introduced me to Stephen King very stepwise. Like, he had a formula. Like, okay, read this first. First one was Salem's Lot. But my favorite King book remains The Shining, which is another one that I've talked to these guys about ad nauseum. I would say that Joseph Heller's Catch-22 was a big influence. Fight Club, Chuck Palahniuk, is a big influence. Fight Club is awesome, but again, Sean likes the movie more than the book, and I like the book.
But I saw the movie first. I think that makes a big difference.
I think the book is you uniquely get his voice, but correct. Okay, David Fincher has a voice too. I get it, but I really love that book. And I feel like I have a bunch of them on my floor there. The Art of Happiness is a book I've reread. I thought of that when Michael was saying rereading. I've reread that about 3 or 4 times. Yeah, very good.
I've read that. I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I liked. I guess. Okay. God, I'm all over the place. The Talisman. I loved because that was my first Stephen King book, and I was 8 years old, which is kind of horrifying because I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, and actually I would let Haley read King now, starting to, but at 8, no. What was wrong with my parents? Because it wasn't like I was reading it and they didn't know. My parents literally didn't care. I wasn't allowed to watch anything I wanted, but I could read whatever I wanted. They were totally fine with words, as though I had no imagination. But whatever, that's awesome. So early Stephen King for sure. I think that by the time I was 14 or 15, I'd pretty much read everything he'd published up until that point, and I've lost track. I definitely have not read as much Stephen King, since then. But a lot of early Stephen King. I think that really influenced kind of the way that I wrote, especially in the beginning. The first book, and then I read a lot as a kid, and then I stopped for a long time. There was like probably a 5-year period where I maybe didn't read a book. But then the first book I read after that long hiatus was called Soldier of the Great War. Probably no one here has heard of it. It's not a big book, but it just touched me. Like, it touched me very, very deeply, and I thought it was one of the books that I thought I could never ever write like that. It's just too beautiful. And it just struck me, and it's a love story, and I have in our Realm and Sands like story list of stories we'll get to someday. There's a story that's only referred to as epic romance, and and when I think of the parallel, like, this is that story, because like right now we're working with Lexi to do some romances, but they're traditional romances. This is an epic romance. Like, this is a romance for the ages, and Soldier of the Great War is that. Like, it's a romance that took place over like 40 years, and is just and so I love that book, and it really inspired me. In fact, I read that the year before Haley was born, and the main character's name is Alessandro, and I wanted to name Haley Alessandra for like 5 minutes, and Cindy was like, no, and then so we named her Haley. But I love that book. I love the book Lonesome Dove. I've read that a few times, and considering its length, I think I've read it 4 times, which is kind of stupid for like how long it is. But I love that book. I just really like the character work, and it's just a simple journey book, but I just love how the characters talk to one another, and there's a lot in between the lines. I love that book. On Writing, clearly. And I'll pick one more before I shut up. And that's a book that I don't want to name it because I don't really want to shit on a book, but I think it's important. And there was a book that I read like the year before I started writing, and it was a Newbery Award winner. And I thought it was such a piece of crap. And I couldn't believe how crappy it was. And I was reading it, and I thought, wow, this is what gets the awards? Like, this is a pretty crappy book. Like, and I didn't consider myself a writer. I didn't think I could write. But that book kind of inspired me to write, because I thought, like, this can't be that hard. And I just, when I think about books that really made a difference in my life, even though that book wasn't a good book, it helped me to believe that I could do it. So I'd say that one too.
No, that's interesting.
I'll give mine real quick.
Sure.
Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Fantastic book. Long John Silver's the best villain ever. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Just because, kind of like what you were talking about, Sean, like, I still think the way Bradbury writes is just so intoxicating and just so incredible. It just blew my mind and really opened my mind up to what good writing could really be. And then the final book that I'll share is 1001 Nights with Scheherazade.
Oh, I know
Scheherazade,
that. I know
yeah.
that book.
Yeah,
that's the Kite Runner guy, right?
No. It's like no one knows who wrote it. I think it's just back.
A collection of the stories.
Yeah, back from the ages, but just fantastic storytelling, just quirky humor, funny stories, and just like the original cliffhangers, like the granddaddy of the cliffhangers. Telling stories to basically save her own life, stop the king from cutting off her head every night. So those are the books that definitely define me.
Jamie?
Stuff. Well, I think probably I've mentioned most of these at some point over our show so far, but obviously, like I've said many times, my mother steeped me in fantasy very, very young. Like when I started reading the Chronicles of Narnia over her shoulder, and then took Tolkien myself when I was like 5 for my first crack at it, and just never turned back from fantasy ever like after that. So it's funny too because like my son's 5 now, and he's just starting to read, and I'm like, wow, like it just seems so. I don't know. I was like a freak that started reading really, really young, and he's reading like. Oh, you guys are like this. We're driving up the street today, and he reads off the sign. He's like, "What are adult toys?"
No.
I was like, my wife and I are trying not to crash. We're laughing so hard. Nice. That's where he's at reading. As you read him good stuff. I've introduced him to great stuff too. But yeah, so I steeped in the fantasy from the beginning there. You know, got into like I don't know that sort of next fantasy stage was like all those, you know, like all those D&D books and stuff like that back in those days. But the Dragonlance ones were the one good
I love
series.
Dragonlance.
Yeah, like that was the good series from among all that stuff. Other people will talk about the Drizzt Salvatore stuff as well, which is pretty good. But the original Dragonlance Chronicles and Legends series, the
I love
brothers
those.
and stuff, that was great stuff.
Man.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that.
One book that it was like buried in my mind that I hadn't talked about in a long time, but Patrick Rothfuss just mentioned there was a humble bundle of the ebooks. Might still be going on, but it's Barry Hugert. It's a book called Bridge of Birds, which is like an alternative China fantasy story that's got all sorts of like Chinese folklore stuff, but it's really funny as well. And so I hadn't been able to find that. My library didn't have it. I don't know if it was in ebook for the longest time, but Subterranean Press re-released it, and now it's in this humble bundle, so I'm going to get to read it again. He was raving about it. Like Patrick Roth was like, wow, this is one of my favorite books ever. And I'm like, oh my God, that like in high school, I think I made like several projects where I, you know, messed around with my assignment to make it that I could do something with that. So that was good stuff back then. Remember, I was lucky enough that they made us read Dune in school, which was like one of the times of your life what they read in school. Yeah, it was either that or Stranger in a Strange Land, and both would be good choices. So,
I did not go to school.
And then then the later one that really influenced me for sort of getting me into historical fiction stuff was what I mentioned before, The First Man in Rome, which is the first book in the Masters of Rome series by the late Colleen McCullough. She just passed away a couple of weeks ago. And that book.
I have that. It's been sitting on my
Oh, I love that book.
Tucker Max gave me that book a year ago and asked me I should read it. And I haven't read it, but
it's unbelievable because it's history, but the characters are so like her men, her women are all incredible, and there's so much nuanced stuff, and there's crazy stuff going on with these decadent Romans as well. But it's got the military stuff, it's got the political stuff, it's got the interpersonal stuff, the love stories in it, and it's so epic. It's like 8 books or whatever that she wrote in this series.
Yeah,
going
that's
all the way
problem. It's too epic. Like the first one's like this, and there's so many of them.
And they're all like that. But it's like that one's Gaius Marius, and the next one's about Sulla's life, and then it gets into Caesar for a few books, and then Augustus for the books later. So it's like that first one is self-contained, but I just love it so much. That turned me on to historical fiction, and then now I blend it with fantasy and what I write. So, and then what got me back into really the one that inspired me just before I started writing too was mentioned before, R. Scott Bakker's Prince of Nothing series. So the first book is called The Darkness That Comes Before. It's crazy epic fantasy with like crazy neurological stuff that like neuroscience stuff that he's into that he's got in there, and he's got like a whole religion that's about like deceiving people, and like this guy's like playing on the religious stuff there and trying to take over the world through it. It's really, but in an epic fantasy series. That
sounds awesome.
Really cool stuff, but pretty grim and pretty dark. So R. Scott Bakker, Bakker, is he's a Canadian writer that I just love that. So that was the one that was like, you know what, this stuff is so cool. And that, along with On Writing, they've already mentioned, were what got me back into really seriously getting into writing, and now I'm doing it too. So
awesome.
Well, we have 2 comments.
Okay.
Before we continue, Quotidian Light is watching. Hi, Maya. She says, hi, guys. And
Hey.
David Anson is also watching. He says, did Sean just wake up or forget to shave?
Neither. I intentionally didn't shave today.
Or he's just been awake so long. We're used to seeing you earlier in the day, right?
And I have been awake a long time. Yeah, it's an hour from bedtime.
Awesome. So I know Johnny and Sean both have other things they need to get to tonight, so I can't thank you both enough for coming. It's been a very fast but awesome conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Oh yeah, this was fun. It was breezy.
Yeah, we could go for hours easily. So where is sort of the best place for people to find you these days? Sterlingandstone.net?
Yeah, that's the mothership. I wouldn't send you anywhere else. That's probably the best place.
And for anybody who doesn't know, that's Sterling with an E. So.
And it is .net, which someday we'll get that done.
One of these days.
Yeah.
See, it's funny. One of the questions we normally ask an author that we have on is like, so where would we get someone to start? But with you guys, that's a question that doesn't even make sense because they'd have to go there just to start figuring out where to start.
Exactly. We're working on that.
Yeah, we're working on that. We have a new theme, supposedly. It's been delayed for a couple of months, but it's supposed to be a boss author's theme, and we'll be able to overhaul and make everything a little bit easier to navigate.
More sensible.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks again for coming.
Oh,
and for
yeah, of course. Thank you.
And for our listeners, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at tbrpodcast@gmail.com, and be sure to visit our Goodreads page. The link should be in the description down below. And we will talk to you next week. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Happy reading, everyone.
Happy reading.